All right, welcome to the deep dive. We're all about taking those sources that have you going, interesting, and turning them into knowledge you can actually
And
use.
use quickly, right?
Exactly. No one's got time to wade through pages and pages these days. So this time, you folks sent in some excerpts from an educational psychology review article.
This is from February 2024.
Yeah, February 2024. Title is a mouthful, but stick with me. The Evolution of Race-Focused and Race-Reimaged Approaches in Educational Psychology. Future Directions for the Field. Whew,
So breaking it down, we're talking about how race plays a role in understanding education, right?
you got it. And our deep dive mission today. Well, we want to figure out what exactly these race-focused and race-reimaged approaches are in the first place.
Why someone would even bother coming up with them.
Exactly. And why they're so important for anyone who cares about how we learn and teach.
It's like getting a whole new set of lenses to look at the field, you know?
100%. Now, what's really interesting is these ideas didn't just appear out of nowhere, right?
There's a history here.
Totally. And the authors, Jessica DeCoeur-Gunby and Paul Schutz, they're actually building on concerns that have been around for decades.
It's like a conversation that's been going on in whispers for a while, and now they're turning up the volume.
Yeah, good analogy. They talk about this sense of weariness, about the lack of attention given to race and racism in the big educational psychology journals.
Those flagship publications that everyone's supposed to be reading.
Exactly. And it's not just a recent thing either. They point back to this research from 1992 by Graham. He noticed similar gaps in those American Psychological Association journals way back then.
So it's not like folks haven't been noticing this.
Nope. And this is exactly what DeCoeur-Gunby and Schutz were trying to address with their 2014 article in Educational Psychologist. That's where they first laid out these concepts of race-focused and race-reimaged approaches.
And now, a decade later, they're revisiting and seeing how those ideas have, well, evolved.
Right, exactly. Which makes you think, what have we missed all these years?
Oh, absolutely. What perspectives, what nuances have been left out just because we weren't looking through this particular lens?
Right. It makes you realize that any field of study, even something as important as education, can get stuck in certain ways of thinking.
It's like wearing blinders.
Yeah.
You're only seeing a limited slice of reality.
And the authors are basically saying, hey, race has been one of those blind spots in educational psychology.
hmm And they're proposing this thing they call a meta-theoretical approach to deal with it.
Now, meta-theoretical, that might sound a bit jargony, right?
Yeah, a little academic for sure. But let's bring it down to earth. What does it actually mean for how we study education?
That's the key, right? Because it's not just about fancy words.
Hmm.
So they define a meta-theory as those basic assumptions, those core principles that shape how an entire field thinks and does research.
Like the foundation, the blueprint underneath everything else.
Exactly. So they're not just saying, oh, here are some new research topics. By calling this a meta-theory, they're arguing for a huge shift in how educational psychology tackles its subject matter.
Fundamental change.
Right. Because what we might have thought were universal truths about learning, about development, could actually be coming from a very specific, often unacknowledged racial perspective.
And that perspective might not be universal at all.
Nope. And it might not be telling the whole story.
And that brings us to the very heart of what theory is for.
Go on, you're on a roll.
Theory is supposed to describe what's happening, explain why it's happening, and explain how it's happening.
Right. And these authors are arguing that we haven't done enough of that, specifically when it comes to race within educational psychology. So this meta-theoretical lens, this whole race-focusing and race-reimaging thing, it's meant to help us do that better.
Fill in those gaps.
Yes. Develop new theories, ask better questions, see the full picture. Okay, so we've got this big picture meta-theoretical approach. And then within that, we've got these two key concepts, race-focused and race-reimaged.
Right. Like two tools in a toolbox.
Perfect analogy. But let's be clear, what does each one mean in practice? How do they actually work?
All right, so the race-focused approach is all about putting race front and center when you're collecting and analyzing data.
So not just kind of, oh yeah, race is there, but really making it the focus.
Exactly. Like think about research that dives deep into racial identity.
How people understand their own race, how they connect with it.
Yeah. Or racial socialization, how we all learn about race, how we navigate this world that's so shaped by racial dynamics, whether we realize it or not.
And then there's the concept of racial microaggressions.
Those little digs, those subtle insults that people of color experience all the time.
Often from people who don't even realize they're doing it. Right?
Exactly. And the key with all of these is race isn't just a box you check on a form. It's the lens through which you understand the whole phenomenon.
So a researcher using this approach wouldn't just be like, okay, how many black students, how many white students do I have in my study? Race would shape the very questions they ask, wouldn't it?
100%.
Yeah,
It's the main variable, the heart of the investigation.
got it. Now, race reimaged, that sounds like it's going a level deeper.
It is. So you've got all these traditional theories in educational psychology,
The ones that have been around for a while.
right? And many of them didn't really consider race when they were first developed. Race reimaging is about going back to those theories, looking at them with this critical social, cultural, historical lens.
Almost like putting on a special pair of glasses.
And the goal is to come up with entirely new race-focused constructs.
Yeah.
The example they give in the article is really helpful. Reimagining self-concept through a Chicana feminist epistemology.
Okay, break that down for me.
So self-concept is this idea of how we see ourselves, right? But traditionally, it's been studied in this kind of universal race-neutral way. This race reimaged approach says, hold on, what if we center the experiences of Chicanas and consider the specific social, cultural, and historical forces that have shaped their understanding of self? Doesn't that give us a whole new way of thinking about self-concept?
So it's not just tweaking the old theory a little, it's potentially coming up with a brand new way of understanding something fundamental.
Right, a way that actually reflects the reality for groups that have been marginalized because of their race. And it's not just about self-concept either. The authors are saying this approach can be applied to all sorts of theories in educational psychology.
So race reimage is basically asking, how does race fundamentally change how we understand this idea? And it's about recognizing that what might seem race neutral is actually coming from a very specific viewpoint, one that might not be neutral at all.
Exactly. It's about uncovering those hidden biases, those unspoken assumptions, and creating something truly inclusive and accurate. But here's the thing. Both of these approaches, race-focused and race reimaged, they're based on some core beliefs about the role of race in research itself.
Like how you even go about doing the research.
Yeah. And the authors are really clear about this. They say their thinking is influenced by three main worldviews: transformative, critical, and pragmatic.
Okay, so we got to unpack those a bit. What's the gist of each one?
Let's start with transformative.
Yeah.
This worldview is all about social justice. It's saying research isn't just some neutral activity. It should be a tool for empowerment, for dismantling systems of oppression, like settler white colonialism, especially in the field of education.
So research with a purpose, with an agenda almost.
An agenda for positive change, yeah.
Yeah.
And it also recognizes that culture deeply shapes how our minds work, how we learn and develop. So from this perspective, research is always happening within a specific social, cultural, and historical context. It's not happening in a vacuum.
And race is a huge part of that context.
Absolutely. It's a lens through which you got to examine everything.
Got it. Now, how does the critical worldview build on that?
The critical worldview zooms out a bit. It says, okay, individual experiences are important, but we got to look at the bigger structures that are creating those experiences.
Those systems that perpetuate inequality.
Exactly. It's not just about individual bad actors. It's about systems of power. And this is where Paulo Freire's concept of critical consciousness comes in. It's about developing this deep awareness of how things like racism are woven into the very fabric of society.
So not just seeing racism when it's blatant, but understanding how it works in subtle, often unseen ways.
Yeah. And the authors also specifically mention critical race theory, or CRT.
Which gets a lot of attention these days, doesn't it?
It does. And for good reason. CRT examines how race, racism, and power operate within legal systems, and how that impacts marginalized groups in education.
So it's about seeing how laws and policies, even seemingly neutral ones, can actually be tools for upholding inequality.
Exactly. And that awareness is crucial for understanding what's really going on in schools and classrooms.
All right, so we've got the transformative worldview focused on social justice and the role of culture. We've got the critical worldview, which is all about systems and power. And lastly, we have the pragmatic worldview. How does that fit into this whole picture?
The pragmatic worldview is all about the how. It's saying, okay, we have these critical social justice questions we want to answer. How do we actually do that? And it takes a really inclusive approach, saying use whatever research methods are the best fit for the job, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or a mix of both.
So not being dogmatic about methods.
Exactly. But there's a catch. Those methods have got to be aligned with that critical social justice framework. The authors give some cool examples like quad crit, tribal crit, critical race mix methods. These are ways of weaving a critical race perspective into the research process itself.
So it's about being rigorous and systematic, but always with that social justice lens in place.
Exactly. It's not just about gathering data, it's about using that data to challenge inequality and create real change.
Got it. So we've got these three worldviews, transformative, critical, pragmatic, working together to form this powerful lens for looking at race in educational psychology.
Right. And the authors argue that this lens helps researchers racialize aspects of theories that might seem race neutral at first glance, which is so important because, all of these race-focused and race-re-imaged approaches, they didn't come out of thin air.
They were a reaction to something.
Absolutely. They were a direct response to and a critique of the field of educational psychology itself.
Which has its own history, right? Its own baggage.
Oh, yeah, big time. And you got to understand that history to see why these new approaches are so necessary.
The authors don't shy away from that history either. They talk about the lack of focus on race in those top journals historically.
Yeah, they found that only 1.3% of articles in those journals really focused on race.
That's tiny, especially when you compare it to Graham's findings from the early 90s. It's like, for decades, we were missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
And it wasn't just a lack of focus either. The authors get into the very origins of the concept of race itself, how it was used to justify terrible things.
Like stealing land from indigenous people, enslaving African.
Yeah. It wasn't just some abstract category. It was a tool for dehumanization.
Right. And it's important to remember, even though science has shown that race isn't a real biological category, it's still a super powerful social construct.
With real consequences, like those health disparities we see.
And the article talks about the American Psychological Association's apology in 2021 for its role in promoting racism.
Admitting that some of the early leaders in the field were, well, outright racist.
Yeah, people who believed in things like eugenics and racial inferiority. It's a stark reminder that the field itself wasn't neutral or objective from the beginning.
Nope. And that legacy still lingers. The authors are also concerned about the lack of representation and recognition for theorists of color in educational psychology.
Whose voices get heard, whose ideas get taken seriously.
Right. It makes you wonder whose perspectives have shaped the field and whose have been left out.
And that leads us right into the issue of race-neutral or deficit theoretical frameworks.
Yeah, those are some of the things these new approaches are trying to challenge and overcome.
The authors talk about how some earlier theories in psychology viewed any difference from the white norm as a deficit.
Like, if you weren't white, you were somehow lacking something.
And while those overtly racist theories are less common now, we've got these more subtle race-neutral perspectives.
Which can be just as harmful because they ignore the reality of systemic discrimination.
It's like saying race doesn't matter, when clearly it does.
And that race-neutral stance often comes from a white Western perspective that's presented as universal.
As if that's the only way to see the world.
Right. And the problem with that is you're completely ignoring the lived experiences of people of color. By pretending not to see race, you're actually upholding inequality.
It's like colorblindness gone wrong, isn't it?
Exactly. And this critique extends beyond just theory into the very methods we use to do research.
The tools of the trade?
The authors point out that a lot of those methods and instruments we use aren't culturally relevant.
Like, they might not be appropriate for studying certain groups.
And some of them were actually designed in ways that would create the appearance of racial deficits.
Wow. Almost like they were rigged from the start.
Right. And then there's this tendency to use white control groups as the norm when you're studying other groups. It's like saying whiteness is the standard, the benchmark against which everyone else is measured.
Which is so problematic. It sets up this implicit hierarchy.
Yeah. And the authors also talk about how often race is just treated as a demographic variable.
Just a box to check.
Right. It's used to describe the sample, but it's not really integrated into the analysis or the conclusions. They're pushing for a much deeper engagement with race in research.
Making it central to the whole process. So given all this historical context, all these critiques, what kind of impact have these race-focused and race-reimaged approaches actually had? I mean, the article mentions about 200 publications referencing their initial work.
Yeah. That's a sign that these ideas are gaining traction.
People are paying attention.
And it's not just lip service either. A lot of those publications are actually doing empirical research using these race-focused and race-reimaged approaches. It's really exciting to see.
It shows that it's not just theory, it's actually changing how research is done.
Absolutely. And what these examples really highlight is the power of this lens. It shifts our focus from individual deficits to systemic influences, from universal claims to culturally specific experiences.
It makes the research more nuanced, more accurate, and ultimately more useful.
Exactly. And the authors provide some really concrete examples, which helps to bring all this to life.
Okay, let's dive into those examples. Let's start with the race-focusing research.
All right, so one study they mention looked at pre-service teachers' colorblind racial ideology.
That belief that race doesn't matter.
Yeah, and what's interesting is they found that this belief was actually linked to difficulty regulating emotions in racially charged situations.
Like maybe getting flustered or defensive when race comes up.
Exactly. And it was also linked to more negative thoughts about people from other racial groups, which is kind of ironic, isn't it? You try not to see race, but it's actually impacting your thoughts and feelings in a negative way.
It's like that whole colorblindness thing backfires.
Totally. And this is especially important because of the demographic gap between teachers and students in the U.S.
Most teachers are white, but students are increasingly diverse.
Right. So understanding how those colorblind beliefs can play out in the classroom is crucial.
It shows that these aren't just abstract ideas, they have real-world consequences.
Another great example is Bird's work on school-level racial climate.
How the racial dynamics within a school can affect students.
Exactly. He developed this framework for understanding how the racial climate of a school can impact student motivation and learning.
So it's not just about individual students, it's about the whole environment.
Right. And recognizing that the racial environment isn't neutral. It can either support or hinder students, depending on how it's structured and how those dynamics play out.
And then there's the research on circles, culturally inclusive and responsive curricular learning environments.
This is a really practical example of how to actually implement those race-focused ideas.
So it's not just about studying race, it's about changing how we teach.
Yeah, circles are about creating learning environments that value and acknowledge the social historical backgrounds of students of color.
So not just pretending everyone's the same.
Exactly. It's about recognizing and celebrating those differences and using them to enhance learning for everyone.
So these are all examples where race is front and center.
It's woven into the research questions, the methods, the interpretations.
It's not an afterthought, it's the main event.
So let's shift gears and talk about some of the race reimaged research.
Okay, so this is where we're taking those existing theories and looking at them through a new lens.
Yeah, and it's really about infusing them with a critical race perspective. For example, Lopez and her colleagues reimagined self-determination theory, that classic theory about motivation.
Yeah, the one about autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Right. They integrated Freire's concept of critical consciousness into that framework.
So they're saying, hey, for students of color, belonging isn't just about feeling connected in general, it's about feeling connected in a way that acknowledges and validates their racial identity.
Exactly. It's about belonging in a system that might not always see or value them for who they are, which adds a whole new layer of complexity to that idea of belonging.
It's not just about feeling good, it's about feeling seen and understood for your full self.
Another cool example is Fong and her colleagues' work on belonging for Indigenous students at community colleges.
This is a group that often gets overlooked, right?
They really do. And this research emphasizes the need for institutions to actively support and honor Indigenous students' identities and cultures.
Not just expecting them to assimilate.
Exactly. It's about saying, we value you for who you are, and we're going to create a space where you can thrive without having to erase your identity.
That's a huge shift in how we think about belonging in education.
It's about creating truly inclusive environments, not just saying everyone's welcome, while still expecting everyone to conform to a dominant culture.
And the final example they highlight is Gray and her colleagues' work on motivational constructs, like utility value and student engagement.
This is about how students see the value of what they're learning, how engaged they are in their education.
And they focus specifically on Black and Latinx STEM students.
Right. And they found that by incorporating concepts of cultural continuity and communalism, you get a much richer understanding of what motivates these students.
So it's not just about individual achievement, it's about their connections to their community.
It's about their sense of responsibility to something larger than themselves.
Which makes a lot of sense given the historical experiences of these groups.
What's really powerful about all these race reimaged examples is that they're all grounded in social, cultural, historical theories.
So they're not just tweaking things around the edges, they're drawing on deep, complex understandings of how race and culture shape experience.
And they really prioritize the voices and experiences of the participants.
Often using mixed methods to make sure those voices are heard loud and clear.
It's about centering the perspectives of those who've been historically marginalized.
Which is such a refreshing change. But even with all this progress, the authors acknowledge that there are still some challenges in areas that need more work.
Yeah, like how do you clearly define what's race-focused versus race reimaged? Sometimes the lines get blurry.
And the process of race reimaging itself, it's not always straightforward, is it?
Nope. They emphasize that it's not just about tacking race onto an existing theory.
Like a Band-Aid solution.
Right. It's about a deep re-examination. You got to look at every part of that theory through a racial lens, considering all those social, cultural, historical factors.
It's about making race integral to the whole research process.
From the very first question you asked to the final interpretation of the data.
And they make a point of clarifying that these two approaches, race-focused and race reimaged, they're actually really interconnected.
Yeah. Race reimaging is like the intellectual groundwork that leads to those new, more nuanced, more relevant race-focused constructs.
So as we reimagine those old theories, we're creating new ways of understanding race in education.
And those new understandings become the basis for future research, right? It's a cycle of growth and evolution.
So where do we go from here? What are some of the future directions the authors suggest?
One big thing is the need to better integrate existing race-focused constructs, things like racialized emotions, into our understanding of key areas like racial coping and well-being.
So recognizing the emotional toll that racism takes on individuals and communities?
And how people navigate those experiences, how they find ways to cope and thrive despite those challenges.
And they emphasize the need to keep critically examining those seemingly race-neutral beliefs.
Because those beliefs can often be harmful, even if they're not intentionally racist.
It's about uncovering those hidden biases, those assumptions we make without even realizing it.
And they point out that most of the race reimaging work so far has focused on motivation.
Which is important, but it's not the whole story.
Right. There are so many other areas within educational psychology that need this kind of critical reevaluation through a racial lens. Things like epistemic beliefs, self-regulation, classroom management practices.
It's like the whole field needs a makeover.
In a way, it does. And they make a really strong statement about the teaching of educational psychology itself.
Like how we train the next generation of educators.
They say we got to foreground race in everything in our textbooks, our course curricula, our classroom discussions.
Not just treating diversity as an afterthought, but making it central to how we understand learning and development.
It's a big ask, but it's crucial if we want to create a more just and equitable educational system.
So this has been a really insightful deep dive into a complex and evolving area of educational psychology. It's clear that these race-focused and race-reimaged approaches are making a real difference in the field, and it's exciting to see where they'll lead us in the future.
Yeah, it's about challenging those old assumptions, those outdated ways of thinking, and ultimately striving for a more accurate and just understanding of education for all learners.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, we have a little thought experiment for you to chew on. Think about a learning experience you've had, maybe in school or in your own life.
Or a theory you've encountered, something that really stuck with you.
Now imagine looking at that experience or that theory through this race-reimaged lens.
What new insights emerge? What assumptions are challenged?
It's a powerful way to connect these ideas to your own life and to keep the conversation going.
And we encourage you to check out those references we mentioned, dive deeper into these concepts.
Keep learning, keep questioning, keep pushing for a more equitable and just world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.